Welcome back, everybody, to Breaking Down Standard. This is Magic with Randy. I am Randy, and today we're going back over all our lovely standard events that happened this past weekend. Kind of going on, seeing what is happening with standard, since we are still in the standard RCQ season. As always, guys, if you like what you're seeing, you like what I'm doing, go ahead and leave a like on the video. Subscribe to the channel, it really helps me out. And let me know what you guys are playing in your RCQs. If you guys are getting ready for the RCs coming up here in the US for Modern, love to hear what kind of decks you're taking or what you're thinking about taking. But let's get into it. Starting off with the first challenge on Friday, we had 6 Gruul aggro decks, 5 Esper bounce decks, 4 Golgari midrange decks, 4 Dimir midrange decks, 3 Jeskai Convoke, 2 Dimir bounce, 2 Boros aggros, 2 caretakers, and then a couple 1-ofs going in there. So not too surprising that we're seeing, Gruul aggro kind of like rise to the top. I've kind of been expecting this for a long time. It's always kind of surprised me that Gruul aggro wasn't putting up more copies. Essentially, the deck is very strong. It's very good. It just took down the Spotlight series, the first one we had in Atlanta a couple weekends ago. Took that down to dominant success. And then I'm not surprised to see Esper Bounce putting up 5 copies. This is a real deck. It kind of broke out the weekend before the Spotlight series, and then has just continuously gained traction since then. Super well positioned deck, kind of taken over the bounce decks. We're not seeing the Simic or the Sultai anymore. We're seeing just Esper be the deck of choice for whatever reason that is. It does have a lot of gameplay. I mean, I know why that is, but I'm still surprised to see Golgari midrange doing anything. Honestly, I don't know why people are still forcing that deck or trying to take that deck to a victory. It just feels really bad in this metagame where we have the aggro decks that can go underneath it and still play the long game against it. We have like the Jeskai Convoke decks that are just going super wide and taking out going that strategy. We have the Esper Bounce decks that just kind of laugh at it by beating it through card advantage and bouncing, their 3 drops and 4 drops while they're playing 2 or 3 1-drops in a turn. And honestly, it's just surprising to see that deck still do well. Dimir midrange, not too surprising. It's still a solid deck in the format. It does struggle more against these bounce style decks, so not too surprising to see that. I'm a little surprised. Only 2 Dimir bounces. I feel like that number should be higher. I think we have a lot of Dimir midrange players who just don't want to convert over to the bounce package. They definitely should. That's where you want to be at if you are still playing Dimir, in my opinion. That being said, though, Gruul aggro, unsurprisingly, did take down this first challenge. We're not seeing anything too new or too crazy in this. Innkeeper's Talent is back in the deck, but that's been hit or miss this whole time now for the last couple weeks now, or last couple months. We keep seeing Innkeeper's Talent, making his way in, coming back, not coming back. All this weird thing. The biggest thing here is we're seeing, 4 Questing Druids, which I think is the correct way to play this deck, and 2 Paul Patch Recruits, which I think is really good. When you're dealing with all these bounce strategies, the bounce decks kind of struggle against Paul Patch Recruit because, you're putting counters on all your creatures. So, when they're bouncing one creature, they're still pumping another one. And it's so easy to trigger the Offspring on Paul Patch Recruit, only needing 3 lands to get 2 bodies. So, just one of those things where it's really good, really well positioned. So not surprising to see 2 of them there. And like I said, I like the 4 Questing Druid. Outside of the side, we're not seeing anything too crazy. Sentinel of the Nameless City is probably the most interesting in this list in the sideboard here. Just because, that is not something we commonly see in these red-green aggro decks. 1 Pyroclasm in the sideboard as well, definitely notating, Jeskai Convoke has been on the rise, doing well in RCQs and these challenges, putting up some more numbers than it normally would. So definitely the deck understanding its position in the meta and understanding that, hey, maybe we should play, a sideboard card or 2 for these Convoke decks because they are doing well and they are showing up in popularity. So nothing too surprising here, but, once again, just a good deck doing well. Making some different changes that we don't see all the time. Like I said, I think the Paul Patch Recruit's where you want to be at if you're still playing Gruul. I should say if you're still playing Gruul, Gruul's a very well-positioned, and popular deck. Not really so much if you're still playing it, so much as if you are playing it or taking it to your RCQs. It's something I would put in my 75 somewhere, for sure. Outside that, we're playing the Mouse package, Hired Claw, good cards, makes sense. Not much more to say to that. Going on to Saturday, the 18th, we did have, again, 7 Gruul aggro decks here in the top 32. along with 5 Esper Bounce, 4 Azorius Tempo. That is the Azorius Oculus deck. That deck popped up a lot over the last couple weeks. It's been putting up a lot more numbers. Jeskai Gavoke putting up 4, Golgari Midrange putting up 3, Domain putting up 2, and then a smattering of 1, including a Dimir Oculus list, which is kind of different. It's kind of an interesting take as a whole. I kind of like the idea behind it. I still think I'm partial to the Azorius Tempo or the Azorius Oculus deck myself, but it is an option if you are wanting to play the Oculus deck but not play the white and play more black for better removal, things like that. That being said, though, Esper Bounce did take the challenge. Not too surprising there. There's not a whole bunch of innovative or interesting thoughts on this one. They are running into, this one was playing the Kaido, which I think is the correct way to build these lists. If you want to play the Esper Bounce, Kaidos give you so much extra value. Essentially, you have Nurturing Pixie, which is a great one to bounce. You have Fear of Isolation, which is a good one to bounce. Worst case scenario, or you have Mockingbird, which is a good one to bounce. Worst case scenario, you bounce like an Otter token. All your creatures you basically want to bounce besides Optimistic Scavenger. Like, that's the cards you just don't want to bounce. You want to keep growing it and making it big, or help triggering your creatures, making them big. So, but this is kind of like the stock style list we've seen. We're playing Go for the Throat, we're playing Nowhere to Run, just that kind of removal spells. We're playing Stormchaser's Talent. Once Sheltered by Ghosts in the main, I think that has where we're putting it more in the sideboard because it's not super good in the main deck anymore. Big thing I see is like Tithing Blades in the sideboard. Usually that was in the main deck for the longest time because that was a great bounce spell. But as we get more and more compact on our creatures and have the smaller creatures or the creatures that nowhere to run to deal with, you don't really need the Tithing Blade so much. So nothing too surprising in this whole 75. Rest in peace. In 3 copies, definitely notating that the Oculus decks are here, they're coming back, things like that. So definitely acknowledging those are problem childs or things to worry about essentially. So heads up play on this player. But outside of that, nothing too crazy. I do think this is probably one of the best decks to take right now in Standard. It's super well positioned. It can grind super late. It can win super fast. This has everything you want it to be. And it even has game against the aggro decks because of those nowhere runs. So definitely just a well positioned deck. Not too much more to write about there than, well positioned deck is well positioned, took down a tournament. So interesting to see how this deck keeps growing, seeing if there's, any major changes. I think the biggest change when you're playing this deck is your sideboard. Essentially, what you expect to play against. Obviously, everyone's local meta is going to be different. So obviously, if you're preparing for like a challenge or something like that, you're going to have a sideboard that's more attuned to a wide meta as to where if at your local RCQ, there's 12 players who are playing mono red, you're probably going to play more Sheltered by Ghosts in the main, take those out of the sideboard, move to the main, maybe move something else to the sideboard to help shore up that matchup, something like that. Or if you had more Oculus players at your local RCQs, things like that, just what you would change differently there. But I think the core of this deck is pretty solid for what we're looking at right now, just as a whole. Moving on to the second challenge, Golgari Midrange put 7 copies. I'm not sure how or why people registered that many copies of Golgari, but here we are. Azorius Tempo put up 6, Dimir Bounce put up 6, Esper Bounce put up 4, Dimir Midrange put up 3, Jeskai Convoke with 2, Roll Aggro with 2, and then Mono Red and Azorius Convoke with 1 each. Really surprising here to see so many Golgari lists. I don't know why there were so many Golgari lists. I think that's just, like I said, I'm a big hater of Golgari. I was a big believer of Golgari early on in the meta, but as we got more to this tempo and bounce style decks, Golgari just feels really badly matched up against them. I played a 4-color bounce list to win my RCQ, and I had to, every time I faced Golgari, it just always felt like a bye. Every time I faced Golgari with that deck, it felt like a bye. It just doesn't feel good, and I can't imagine being, Dimir or Esper and just thinking, man, I queued up into Golgari, this is a bad matchup. Like, it's just, this town ain't big enough. It's just so good against that deck, and I don't know why people are still trying to force this, like, mid-range 3-mana cards that don't do enough or don't impact the board when they come into play type situation. So, this is me hating on Golgari. Maybe I'm wrong. But that being said, the one mono red player did get it and did take down the challenge. Nothing really surprising here. Honestly, the biggest surprise is that there's none of the colorless manland in this list. I know a lot of these mono red lists have been playing that colorless manland. This player opted, just for mountains and rock face village. Just kept it really simple. We had the mouse package along with Higher Claw, Monstrous Swift Spear, and Force Screaming Nemesis, and burn and pump spells. Basically, we got the Burst Lightning, the Lightning Strikes, Monstrous Rage, and Witchtalker Friendly. We just kept it really simple. We didn't do anything flashy. We're not doing anything special. We came here to cast our red spells, and we're going to cast our red spells. That's pretty much all we came here to do. Notice, though, they did have 2 Pyroclasms in the sideboard. Again, kind of that nod that Jeskai Convoke is popping up in popularity and doing well. Same thing with being able to kind of like curtail the Esper bounce list, being able to kill some of their little creatures and stuff like that. Because with prowess, all your creatures will still live, essentially. So kind of don't have to worry about that. And then outside of that, nothing really special or different in the sideboard to say. Nothing really to write home about. Just kind of your stock mono red list, or I guess a little unstock with playing so many basic mountains over any of the colorless dual land, or not colorless man lands, not dual lands. So outside of that, just kind of really stock list for mono red. And then we have one more challenge on Saturday with Gruul Aggro putting up 7 copies, Esper Bounce putting up 6, Dimir Midrange with 4, Golgari with 4, Jeskai Convoke with 2, Mono Red with 2, Azorius Tempo with 2, Azorius Convoke with 2, Gruul Delirium with 1, Dimir Bounce with 1, and Boros Aggro with 1. So very heavy on the aggro decks and the bounce decks there. Still putting up a lot of copies in it. I think this is a pretty accurate representation of what you'll see going into like any kind of random RCQ, essentially. Like if you're expecting kind of like a random RCQ, you're gonna see a lot more aggro, you're gonna see the bounce decks, and you see a couple of the mid-range decks, and some of the like Azorius Tempo, and then some random one-ofs, like that Gruul Delirium, things like that, where players are like, oh, I've been playing this deck, I think it's really good, and like, no, obviously it could take down a tournament, it could surprise everyone, but you're not expecting to see Gruul Delirium at the top tables. Not saying that's a bad deck, I'm just saying it's one of those things. This is someone's pet deck more so than it is a wide competitor that you're going to see multiple times in a tournament. That being said, though, we did see Esper take it down again. If you'll notice, I think this is the exact same list that we had win the last one. Kind of just where we're at. I think this is pretty much the stock version. As to where we saw with Dimir Midrange, when we saw that being like the most popular deck, that 60 always kept changing. We weren't sure on what numbers to play. Esper Bounce has kind of figured out what they want to play and what they want to do, and they're doing it quite well. Clearly, they're still putting up a lot of copies in these top 32s, top 64s. They're also taking down tournaments. I know if you pay attention to Matic Twitter or Matic or the other one, you'll always see people posting won my RCQ with Esper. This is definitely a deck that if you have the ability to build it or you're on the fence about building it, I definitely suggest taking it, getting some reps in with it. It's a good deck. It's probably something I'm going to pivot over to, but obviously we have a long time before the RC that I need to prep for this one. So, but definitely a good solid deck, and I just kind of wait to see how it keeps evolving. Maybe Aether Drift will bring something into the format that will change it to where these bounce decks aren't so good. That's yet to be seen, obviously, but as it stands right now, these are where you want to be at. The Esper bounce deck or Dimir bounce decks are some of the best decks. I still think that the Sultai bounce deck isn't bad or that badly positioned. I think this is new hotness. Everyone's been playing it. I do think that deck is still very good and very plausible. Definitely something to look into if you want to still play like the bounce style decks. But yeah, at this point, I think that we've kind of found our quote unquote one of our best decks in the format, or at least one of the top 5 decks. I think as we're looking at it right now, if we go back here, I think that this is a pretty good representation of kind of our top 5 here. Is like definitely Gruul Aggro is probably either number 1 or number 2, followed by Esper Bounce, and then I probably put either Jeskai Convoke at number 3, and probably I'm trying to think. Those would be my top 3, I think, for sure. And I think it gets a little muddier as you get down to like the 4 and 5 slots. But I definitely would put like Gruul Aggro, Esper Bounce, and Jeskai Convoke is probably the top 3 decks if you're looking to take down your RCQ. I would take and build one of those. Jeskai Convoke is super cheap outside of the lands, and the lands aren't super expensive. But I mean that's like most of your money right there. If you're looking for a cheap way to take down an RCQ, that's what I would do. Gruul Aggro, again, not super expensive. I know the Screaming Nemesis were super expensive. I'm not sure if they've dropped down in price at all. I haven't really kept up with those prices. I've just been paying more attention to what's going on in Modern because of that RC coming up. But yeah, I mean, I think that's where you want to be if you're looking to take down your RCQs, get qualified for the next RCs. That's where you want to be at, is on one of those 3 decks. They're very powerful. They can take down tournaments without trying too much. Obviously, you know, there is gameplay. You got to learn the deck to some degree. It's not just, you know, I brought this deck, I've never played it, I'm going to win type situation. But they are very powerful and can do a lot of crazy things in the standard format. As always, guys, if you like what you're seeing, like what I'm doing, go ahead and leave a like on the video. Subscribe to the channel. It really helps me out. Let me know what you guys are playing in your RCQs. I'd love to hear from you. Let me know if you're playing anything or practicing for the Modern RCs coming up. I'd love to hear from you about that as well. And I'll catch you guys next time.